All right, let me start with a question of morality. Is it wrong to steal from thieves? Actually, even better because it's not just about the concept of theft. Is it wrong to steal an actual thing that was already stolen by the thieves? To be completely honest here, I don't know if there's an actual answer to that question. Is it still wrong because the action itself is what crosses a moral boundary, or is it fair game because the thing you're stealing doesn't belong to the person anyway? It's a philosophical question that's been debated for centuries, actually, with some people arguing that stealing from thieves is somehow a moral thing to do because you're undermining their own ill gotten gains. But in my view, it's a pretty obvious bad thing still. I might find it funny that the original thief has now been stolen from, or maybe karmically just, I suppose. But at the end of the day, now there's two thieves running around who are clearly perfectly fine with doing that sort of thing in the first place, so everyone is kind of worse off as a result when business culture becomes let's go steal for profit. Basically, stealing is wrong, but what happens when the original thief turns around and gets upset about the fact that they were stolen from? That's called being a clown, and it's precisely what OpenAI is now doing as they accuse DeepSeek of stealing from them when they themselves are probably the biggest example of personal enrichment by digital theft in human history. Let me start with this. Background, I guess. OpenAI, led by Sam Altman, from the video thumbnail of course, is a private research lab developing artificial intelligence. For the majority of its lifespan, the company has been a non-profit organization, but sometime in 2025, a shift is taking place where the company will become for-profit and give equity to Sam Altman himself. Meanwhile, Sam Altman is basically on a world tour of fundraising. He wants $7 trillion for the pursuit of artificial intelligence. He's approaching entire nations like the United Arab Emirates, and he's standing in front of the cameras with President Trump as hundreds of billions of dollars get allocated for his projects. It's pretty safe to say that AI, as an industry, is currently very sharply in focus, but as with any sort of technological race, there's an abundance of different players. Enter DeepSeek. DeepSeek is a relatively new contender in the world of artificial intelligence, but it's also one of the most disruptive contenders. Apparently, according to DeepSeek themselves, their newly released model was trained with a fraction of the time and relative computing power compared to the most recent models from OpenAI. That claim is being widely disputed, by the way, with some people claiming that DeepSeek is just straight up lying about this, which they probably are to a degree. But that doesn't really matter because when this new AI challenger, so to speak, was first unveiled, it hit the market like a freight train. Whether you believe them or not, this was effectively a brand new AI model competing with or surpassing OpenAI's GPT-01 in practically every single benchmark, developed and trained for, allegedly, a fraction of the cost, which DeepSeek began giving away for free to the entire rest of the world for a time. Now it's restricted to only Chinese phone numbers for registration, I believe, but it's basically open source and they were giving it away, essentially. Remember, Sam Altman has been trying desperately to convince everyone, the whole world, that he needs trillions of dollars for his company to work, and yet this new challenger appeared to be undermining that claim in totality. I don't know if I'm properly doing it justice right now, probably not, but when DeepSeek hit the market initially, it sparked off a near $600 billion market slide for NVIDIA, which is the single largest one-day stock decline in United States history. Certain over-leveraged ETF funds were posting losses as high as 50%, while the entire rest of the tech market dropped in tandem. Some outlets described it as, quote, a nearly $1 trillion US tech implosion, end quote. And the reason for that was DeepSeek, really. Obviously, that's a massive problem for OpenAI, at least, so what do? Oh, well, simple. They accuse DeepSeek of stealing from them using a process called distillation. They claim to have evidence of this happening, which is supposedly in breach of OpenAI's terms, but this is where we find a pretty cosmic level of irony, because OpenAI, like I said earlier, are probably the biggest information thieves in the history of humanity. OpenAI, just to put it in simple terms, has already scraped a frankly immeasurable amount of data from the whole internet, and they're not stopping. The approach is to get as much information as they possibly can from everywhere as fast as possible, because even if they get punished for that behavior eventually, and even if the laws get changed or regulations get crafted to prevent that kind of behavior in the future, you can't close the stable door 3 weeks after the horse ran away and magically think, well, the horse is going to be back now. It's not. Here's just a cursory look at the situation that OpenAI has found themselves in as a direct result of their aggressive policy that stealing data from every single possible location they can find contained in the entire internet is a completely fine thing for them to do. Here goes. OpenAI is actively being sued by the Authors Guild of America, which is the country's oldest and largest professional organization for writers, because they stole entire bodies of printed work, innumerable numbers of them, in order to train their language model. They're also being sued by pretty much all of America's major newspaper companies because, surprise, surprise, they stole those too. On a more international scale, because my viewers aren't just in America, my audience is majority global, they're being sued in Canada by the Toronto Star, Metroland Media, Post Media, the Globe and Mail, the Canadian Press, and CBC, among others. Over in India, there's complaints moving through the court system, such as the one from ANI, which is a major news publishing platform. And then for the UK, they're being sued by a parent organization called Mumsnet, I think, which is also going after other AI data scraping companies as well. Back home in the United States, they've been sued by The Intercept, Raw Story, Alternate Media, and the New York Times, which they have temporarily fought off, right? They've managed to do that, claiming that it's fair use for them to steal other people's work and train an AI model on it. However, the judge did also explicitly state that these organizations were mostly allowed to refile those cases if they wanted to. On the privacy side, OpenAI has not one, but two different lawsuits against them for stealing people's personal information and medical records, one of which was temporarily dismissed because the claim was too long and needed to be trimmed down. The judge said that it, quote, contains swaths of unnecessary and distracting allegations, making it nearly impossible to determine the adequacy of the plaintiff's legal claims, end quote. So not really dismissed on merit necessarily, but more so because the attorney was a moron, which does happen. And they've got a case against them by the Center for Investigative Reporting as well. All of this makes no mention of the multitude of individual cases being brought by celebrities, writers, business founders, you name it, which OpenAI is attempting to have dismissed, all of them in a variety of different ways, mostly arguing that it's just perfectly fine for them to scrape and use everyone's data, because scraping data and using it to train a language model is fair use. Keep in mind, there's a veritable chasm here that exists between morality and legality. It may be perfectly legal for them to do this, if that's how the laws get interpreted by certain judges, but it's certainly not moral for them to do so. And again, this is a cursory glance at the topic of lawsuits, because OpenAI has stolen data from practically everyone at this point. I wouldn't be surprised if the list of publishers and content producers and whatever else that are openly suing the company triples or quadruples in the short term, until we have rock-solid case law on whether it's legally permissible or not for a company to scrape everyone's personal information and professional works in order to train their own software. However, regardless of where that legality ends up, not sure where at this point, the sheer comedy of what we see today is born from the fact that after stealing everyone's data to train their software, OpenAI is now complaining that it's against their terms for another AI company to steal those outputs. It's hard to even describe how brain dead these people are when the case that they're actively making in dozens of international courts hinges purely on the fact that it should be okay for someone to take data they don't own and use it for training. Except when DeepSeek takes their data and uses it for training, well, now wait a second, that's against our terms. They should stop. Apparently what they're doing is called distillation, where you take a big model, which is trained on all of our collective stolen data, and then refine it down into a new, much more efficient type of model, which is theft on top of theft, like compound theft, I guess. When the original thieves now whining and complaining because someone harvested their data, much the same way that they stole from everyone, but now that's not cool. Now it should be prevented. It's funny because most people don't even understand the inherent value that data has. It's used for all sorts of things, but if you don't know that something has value to begin with, you're not going to care if it gets stolen or copied, right? If you have a piece of junk sitting on your floor and someone comes by and makes an exact copy of that junk, you're not going to care. But if it's a priceless artifact and the copy is indistinguishable from the original, you're going to care. And people, of course, make the argument that generative AI isn't doing that, even though it basically is in a lot of circumstances. But yeah, the whole point is that you're not going to care if someone steals something that you perceive to have no value, And a lot of people perceive that their data has limited or no value, when in reality it's extremely valuable. But that's a whole tangent. Yeah, I don't know. However, back on task. OpenAI is fully aware of how valuable data is, which is the reason that they're so dedicated when it comes to stealing more of it, and so painfully transparent with their anger when it subsequently gets stolen from them. You can't have it both ways. You can't take data from every single company on Earth as fast as possible and argue, well, this is fine because we're using it to train a thing that outputs slightly different variations of everybody's work, and then have any ground to stand on whatsoever when your content is stolen for that same purpose. DeepSeek outputs slight variations on outputs from OpenAI, which is slight variations or even perfect replicas in some cases compared to what they stole from the world. But yanking the ladder up after you climb is basically a Silicon Valley social standard now, because why have consistent principles when consistency of principle makes you far less money? Remember, this is the company that was previously non-profit, now turning for profit and seeking trillions of dollars, who is now upset that a cheaper, faster, more freely available tool compared to their own trained by stealing the data that they stole prior to this. I don't know how you would possibly write a script about this to make it any more pathetic than it already is. I mean, look at this. Look at this title. Microsoft is apparently probing to see if DeepSeek improperly obtained OpenAI data. That's like a sitcom title or something. You mean the data that OpenAI improperly obtained from the entire world? And so what if DeepSeek did? What the fuck are you going to do about it? Sue them because they stole what you stole and did the exact same thing you did? I swear, the technology executives in this country have completely lost the plot. And I know that America collectively seems to worship these people as geniuses and better than the rest of us, but the reality is they're just crooked, and they're stupid a lot of the times, but they're mostly just crooked. It's okay if I steal, but you better not. Also, I need $7 trillion, please. Bottom line, I hope they all go broke. They won't, because these people never do. But the concept of stealing from thieves is so perfectly personified here by DeepSeek and OpenAI, I had to make a video about the clown show. That's it. If you support the channel, check out the links down below. A special VPN deal for anyone interested. Everybody could use a VPN. Locals and Patreon, which are way better than Google AdSense for me at least, and more, but I'll cut it there and stop rambling. As always, thank you all for watching. Question everything, and have a nice night.